Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of Pebble People. Today, I'm joined by Rebekah, and I am so excited to be introducing her to you, specifically because we have been talking about after-school clubs and out-of-school clubs, which are a little bit more all-encompassing when we think about um, activity providers providing care for school-age children when they're not at school. That's specifically what we're talking about. And our providers have been asking us so many questions. They want to know how they could get started. They want to know when they're actually in it, how they can streamline their operations, etc. So we thought, why not bring an expert or the expert, Rebekah, and have her join us today on Pebble People to talk to us about her experience and what the Out of School Alliance can do and does on a regular basis. So welcome, Rebekah. I'd love for you to introduce yourself for us if you can.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. For those of you who are listening and haven't stumbled across me before, my name's Rebekah Jackson Reece. I am the CEO at the Out of School Alliance. So we are a membership organisation supporting wraparound and out of school providers in England. Our mission is the success of the sector. So we not only have an extensive range of information available and support, advice and guidance, but we also engage in influencing and advocacy work. So we're exceptionally busy at the moment, but really loving the attention on our sector at the moment. So yeah, thanks for bringing us on to have a chat.
Great. And Rebekah, you also established and run the Bold Type Training and Consultant Agency. So how do these both work together with the Out of School Alliance?
So when I left working in local authorities, I'd been made redundant twice in my career and actually decided that I'd had enough of people having control over my own destiny, really. And what I did was I set up the Bold Type Training and Consultancy. We're a specialist childcare consultancy. So we engage, we do training, we do coaching, we do mentoring, big consultancy projects, all sorts of bits and bobs, really, across all types of childcare. And in 2020, during the sort of the later part of that year, I was approached by Claire and Catherine, who set up the Out of School Alliance back in 2009. And they asked me if I would like to take it over because they were actually on their way out. They had been hoping to do that prior to COVID, but like many people, COVID sort of changed lots of plans in business. And I then took over the reins in June 2021, which feels like a heartbeat, but also like a lifetime ago. So that's how the two companies interact. The Bold Type, as such, owns and operates the Out of School Alliance, and the Out of School Alliance is part of what we do.
Right. Okay. Perfect. That's super clear. And so, what I would love to sort of understand a little bit is what are some of your main activities today? Is there something that you're doing more of or less of in today's world at the Out of School Alliance? Like any sort of pressing topics that you think, you know what, this is occupying a lot of my time?
Some of your listeners will have heard of the National Wraparound Childcare Programme, which actually takes up most of my time, surprisingly. The way in which our work at the Out of School Alliance has really evolved since 2021 is that when we spoke to members, and we didn't really change anything to start with, but when we spoke to members, what they told us was that they didn't feel that we as the Out of School Alliance were doing enough influencing and advocacy, that was what they felt was missing, that they wanted a voice for the sector, that their voice needed to be amplified, that they weren't being heard, they weren't being valued, that they weren't being seen by government and considered, really. And I think that was a fair comment. I think it was a fair comment. So that work around building good relationships, speaking to the Department for Education, getting a conversation going with Ofsted, for example, all of that work became part of the aim that our members had for us. So we needed to push forward with that. Roll on to where we are now, and the vast majority of the work that I do as CEO is actually that influencing representation, amplification of the voice of our members. So we have a seat at the table with the Permanent Secretary Stakeholder Group within Department for Education, right at the top tier, if you like, of representation. We also support the Department for Education's understanding of the sector, the development of the National Wraparound Childcare Policy, the National School Breakfast Programme that is coming up as well. as well as supporting Ofsted with their childcare regulatory reform. So we spend a lot of time, well, I spend a lot of time talking on behalf of members, representing, challenging, influencing, and having really good conversations. I've now got a team. Abby Wilkins, who's our COO, she supports a lot of the membership everyday inquiries. So she does the bit that I miss the most, I think, the bit of actually sort of supporting our members on a day-to-day basis, really. But that's how things have changed over the last, what, 3 years? Again, feels like a heartbeat and feels like a lifetime ago, but that's the work that we're really proud of at the moment, that members asked for a voice and we now have amplified that voice on their behalf.
Amazing. What are you, is there something that you're particularly proud of that you've achieved in those 3 years that you wanted to highlight? Obviously, apart from being able to amplify that voice and be present, is there a specific success story you have to share?
I find it really hard to pick one success story because you almost feel like you devalue some of the others, and
Yeah.
and it's not really for me to say in many ways, but I think one of my proudest moments really has been seeing the guidance for local authorities, schools and trusts that came out around the National Wraparound Childcare Programme. Almost hearing the language of the sector reflected in that document. And let's be honest, that guidance came a long way in a short period of time. So having the language of the sector and our voice represented through that was a really proud moment. I actually didn't spot it. It was a colleague of mine who said, "Have you seen this? Have you seen and heard how much the work that we've all done?" And it's not just the work that I've done, it's the bravery and the honesty and the openness with which the sector are also engaged in that process as well. She flagged that with me and I was like, oh yeah, I hadn't spotted that, thank you. We've also had some, like what I call sort of everyday success stories as well, that of providers who've overcome adversity, who have been ready to throw in the towel, who really are facing significant challenge. Maybe a school is sort of threatening to take over their provision that they've been running on site for 20 years, and we've supported them, we've stood in their corner. And I think it's those small everyday success stories that it's hard to navigate through picking a proudest moment of one of those, really.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I can totally see that. Sometimes, also your proudest moment changes and your success story you want to highlight changes depending on the context of the day, the minute, the hour, right? So I think it's great though to recognize you have so many of those to choose from. And I think that's the important part, right? So we've talked a little bit about, kind of the macro level of the policy changes and making sure that the voices of the people you're representing are heard, etc. Can you tell me a little bit though about sort of those everyday challenges that some of these out of school providers face? Are there any that are, for example, maybe if we think a little bit about somebody who's just getting started versus somebody who's well established, I would love to hear a little bit what are some of the most common things you help with and some of the common issues that they might face if somebody's thinking about, getting involved.
Absolutely. The number one issue that we provide support, advice and guidance on, and that providers are facing and they're very fearful of, is Ofsted.
Okay.
Ofsted registration. We spend a lot of time with providers who are in the operating, in the non-regulated space, who want to move into a regulated model. So they're sort of operating outside of the need to register with Ofsted currently, or who are looking at setting up a new provision and they're not sure how they fall under the registers and the process to go through. So we spend quite a lot of time working with individual providers from that basis.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of confusion in our sector about those registers, how they fit, what process to go through, what it actually means, because we've got disapplications of the EYFS, and that's kind of one of the most common everyday issues that we come across and that we deal with, really. And it's one of the things that we can really help with because we deal with it every day. We deal with it day in and out. And we understand those exemptions inside out. We understand that people will be fearful, potentially fearful about Ofsted registration, but also about Ofsted inspection as well. So some of the work that we do with providers and members is actually about breaking that down and helping them to understand how to be ready for inspection, how to feel confident. Not only doing that sort of on a one-to-one basis, but also providing those resources that they can self-serve as well. So I think one of those kind of key examples really is very much that Ofsted thread that runs through everything that we do, you know, helping people understand exactly what they need to do, what they need to worry about, and actually what they need to stop worrying about, because that's sometimes the most important part, and where they need to put their focus, where they need to put their investment of time, resources, money, whatever that might look like, to navigate through that really. That's one of the key things that we do.
Okay, that's super helpful, and it's actually something that we keep hearing too. As we support some activity providers, they might say, you know, I'm super interested in thinking a little bit about getting involved with a school and making my work more formal. But then there's the whole Ofsted thing. What do I do? And so, etc. And so, um, I'm wondering, how does an activity provider, you know, kind of come to know about you guys and get in contact with you? Is there a sort of a journey that's pretty clear? Do they come from all sorts of places? Tell me a little bit about how they, you know, kind of make contact with you guys and how they start the journey.
For most providers, they'll come across our website.
Okay.
I've been calling it recently the encyclopedia of out of school provision. It's absolutely huge, and I have to give credit to Claire and Catherine as the founders for creating the enormous beast that is the website and dragging all of that information together and providing that resource and having that vision. It works in two ways, and providers can access that information in sort of two ways. We make sure, and this is one of the values that we have as a company, is that we make sure there's something for everybody, that we make sure that there is an amount of information that is free. So for some providers, that will be enough for them to answer their questions. Then we have stuff that is available, becomes available once you become a member, and it's a really low cost model. We try to keep costs as low as we can so that we can help as many people as we can. And then on top of that, the sort of the tip of the pyramid really is where we have that complex issue support. So we then can do some one-to-one work. But most people will come in at that sort of free level, consume the information on the website, work out whether or not that responds to their need, and then they will make a decision about whether or not to join us and access even more information or even more support. That's not the normal route that people go through, but we also, and one of the things that we're quite proud of, is that we get a huge amount of referrals.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who's in business knows that the best thing that we can get is a referral. The best thing is somebody telling you, or your friend or somebody else who's in a situation, I know how to help you. These are the people to go to. So we do get a lot of that. And we've got our social media accounts. We try to put lots of snippets on there. We've got lots of videos coming out so that people can know and understand that we're there, know and understand that we can provide that level of support, and that they know that we can solve their problems for them. It all starts with a conversation. It's one of my tenets in business is, let's just have a conversation. Let's have a really good conversation about what your issue is. We can help you a little bit, and this is how we can help you some more.
Right. And how do people get it? There are different layers of how they can get involved, right? With the Alliance, like they can literally, as you said, use the website for their knowledge. They can maybe look at a specific article. They could maybe look at some snippets on social media. But talk to me about how else they can get involved. Like in order to have the conversation, do they have to become members? By being members, do they have different access to different things? It would be great to sort of tell our listeners what sorts of things, like from very basic to sort of more involved, they can do.
Absolutely. So we do provide a small amount of free support, but we do limit that because to be able to keep it low cost for everybody, we do have to limit the free support that we offer.
Yeah.
Once a provider joins us as a member, what they have access to is absolutely everything on the website. Anything in terms of those sort of more in-depth articles that they can read. There are some free briefings, video briefings that they can access through our academy. And then what they can access in terms of support is telephone and email support, but also they can book 2 half-an-hour personal one-to-one consultations with either Abby or myself, or another member of the team, depending on what they're struggling with, and they can book those at any point during the year, so they can access that support in lots of different ways. We find that lots of people are quite happy with that self-service support, and we try to signpost people around the website as things change through the newsletter. So our newsletter is a monthly curated. It starts off very small when we start writing it, and then when we actually finish adding everything in, it becomes a bit of a huge missive, really, from our newsletter. So we send that out to all of our members every month. And again, we try to signpost people to stuff that is going to be useful for them at that point in the year, or stuff that's happening in the wider context that we want to draw their attention to. Has there been a change to EYFS? Have we updated a policy? Signpost them so that they can navigate through to the right area of unlocked access through the membership, such as our paperwork library, where we have reference copies of all of the policies that are available. So it's, like I say, encyclopedia out of school, it's absolutely huge. If there's anything that people want to find, we've got information on it. And if they need more support, advice, guidance, a listening ear, we're there as experts in what we do, experts in providing information and a guidance, but also providers as well. So the team are providers. So we see it from lots of different layers as well, right from government all the way through to that everyday practice. We've got access to that kind of knowledge and wisdom, really, to provide support.
Okay, perfect. And so that's the layer, right, for providers. What about parents? Do you do much for, or what can you offer a parent that is a little confused about how to navigate out of school?
We've got a basic information page available for parents, but we don't sort of provide a direct service for parents. We will never turn a parent away.
Right.
If a parent emails us, that sometimes we have parents who are concerned about what they've seen in their wraparound provision. Always valid, always a valid step, really, for a parent to ask for help to either understand more or know what to do if something is actually wrong. So we would never sort of turn somebody away and say we can't help you. But a lot of the work that we do is around signposting. So we would apply that to parents as well. We would apply that to say, perhaps speak to your local authority, have a chat with your family information service. We quite often have parents who've got children with SEND or who are looking for some more inclusive childcare. So again, just knowing how to signpost them through is sometimes as much as a parent might need.
Yeah.
Do they need to raise a formal complaint, and how do they do that? Or is it going to be enough for them to have a conversation, to feel heard, and then for us to advise them to go and have a lovely chat with their provider and actually raise that at a provider level so that things can be resolved? Or do we need to signpost them off to get some additional support because it's not really a wraparound out of school issue that they need support with? So again, a lot of the work that we will do in that situation is helping them, standing in their corner, really, because what we know as humans, as service users ourselves, is that sometimes we just need to have somebody who's got the time to listen, to help them feel heard and to pop them on the next step of that journey where they're not sure.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So one of the questions that I have is, I hear from parents, etc., which is why I kind of brought this up, was there are schools that will have an after school club that will just be, activities that are run in the school that are not wraparound care and they're not Ofsted registered. And then they'll have their wraparound care, so to speak, which are Ofsted registered and which will also be run in the school. What is the difference between those two?
It's really interesting, isn't it, that we've got so many bits within this sector.
Yeah.
So the government's definition, and I'll start there, is that wraparound childcare is where a provider operates in a way that falls under the legal definition of childcare. So that's for more than 2 hours in a day, for more than 14 days in a year, and isn't adult-led coaching and education type activity. Okay, right. So that's broadly speaking, the education, the regulated side, the legal definition of childcare. So Under the National Wraparound Childcare Programme, schools and providers are being encouraged to provide wraparound childcare from at least 8 o'clock in the morning through to 6 o'clock in the evening, and that is to support families who need to work. That is paid for childcare, and that could be lots of different opportunities to play or to engage in activities throughout that period of time, and that could be before and after school, but it could also be during the holidays as well. So that's regulated childcare.
Okay.
What we also have is what I call extracurricular activities.
Mhm.
The government calls them out of school provision.
Okay.
So we've got, when I talk about, we've got this real difficulty, we've got a bit of an identity crisis going on in the sector at the minute. And we've had to change our language. You know, we are called the Out of School Alliance because our way of describing what we do is out of school childcare. Now we're talking about wraparounds, and so, you know, it makes it really difficult to understand and navigate. So when we've got schools who are doing extracurricular enrichment type activities for a short period of time, maybe till 4:30 after the school day, that will fall outside of the legal definition of childcare, so would be an out of school activity.
Okay.
Probably not necessarily making that any clearer, but it's about that legal definition of childcare. Now, for me, the defining factor is, what does a parent need to build that patchwork of provision for their family? Most schools will have some kind of extracurricular, skill acquisition, coaching type offer that is delivered by teachers or by qualified professionals, coaching professionals, sports professionals. Absolutely brilliant. And that's great for lots of kids.
Yeah.
But also for some kids, that's not the right offer. And for some families, that's not the right offer. And they need an extended, less adult controlled environment for them to be in before and after school. So there's lots of threads, I suppose, to pull through in terms of differences. And it's really hard sometimes to define that in ways that are really easily understood. And again, part of the complexity that we have in this sector and part of that identity crisis that I think we've got going on as well.
Yeah, and I think it's an identity crisis, and it also trickles into creating some confusion for an activity provider that say they want to get involved, because we've seen it quite a lot at Pebble. What happens is we have an activity provider who runs community classes at a local, venue, and they do, 3 or 4 days a week. I don't know, at a specific time, and the parents drop those children off, and et cetera, et cetera. Then they say, you know what? We want to get involved in out of school. We want to work with schools, offer our services there. And then it suddenly becomes a bit of a minefield. Like, can we, if we just do what we do as a community class and just run it after school at the premise like an hour, is that then, do we need to be Ofsted regulated? Do we not? And if not, and we want to do wraparound care, then what are the pros and cons? And it's like, or should we just do what we do, but do it in the school right
Yeah.
after, the normal school time? So I guess that's sort of the question for you, is like, what are the pros and cons of actually becoming an Ofsted registered provider and doing regulated wraparound care versus just, running your community class for an hour after the normal school time?
I think we get asked this a lot, and for me, the question that I'm annoying. I'll always ask a question to find out more, but the question that I'll always ask first of all is, why would you not want to move into a regulated space? Most providers will say, well, we don't understand, and we're a bit fearful of what we don't understand. And Ofsted and registration and regulation has had a bit of a tough press recently as well. So I think there is a lot of fear.
Hmm.
My response is always that the in-school age childcare, the way in which the regulations are applied really provides that baseline below which we shouldn't fall in terms of safe standards of practice. And those safe standards of practice are about what's really good provision for children when we're operating, where we're supervising other people's children, really. So sometimes when we break things down a little bit and we look at what those safe standards of practice are, providers like your primary audience, those activity providers, they'll go, well, yeah, I'm doing all of that already. And I'm like, well, there you go. You know, this is just one step forward where you're able to provide more hours or more types of activity, more of a service that parents very often are asking for when people start thinking about, okay, yeah, this might be a move I want to make. So for providers who are thinking about stepping into that wraparound regulated space, I'd ask them, I suppose, to consider whether or not, and to look at the standards, because they're available on the internet, and just work through them and say, actually, do you know what? I am doing most of this already.
Mhm.
What is stopping me? And sometimes it's to know the question that they need to go and ask next, which sometimes is, okay, well, what does inspection look like in this space? What's the difference between the compulsory childcare register and the voluntary part of the childcare register? What does it mean about EYFS? Do I have to do children's learning and development journeys if I take children in reception class, for example? So all of those next questions start to flow out when we address hang on a minute, I'm actually just a little bit scared because it's Ofsted and it feels quite scary. That's generally the conversation that we tend to have with providers who are stepping into this space, is just to break down some of the myths. And there's a lot of good information out there, but there's also some stuff that's a bit odd. And sometimes you read something and you think, or you listen to something, or somebody gives an opinion, you think, that doesn't quite feel right. Where can I go to ask that next question? And that's where we step in.
Got it. Okay. And how much of their day-to-day management of their business will get influenced by them moving into regulated childcare? Is there, or sort of, out of school clubs that are regulated by Ofsted? Is the expectation that the management of their business is going to change quite dramatically, i.e., they might need new software, new resources, new tools, different staff, different qualified staff? Does that ever come into question? Like, apart from the fear of the unknown of getting registered and inspections, is there a bit of a shift that's going to happen to their business that maybe they've not thought through? Does that ever come up?
It does come up, but for most providers, there's very little change.
Okay.
It does very much depends on to what extent they're working towards those safe standards of practice already. Um, we always recommend that providers have a look at those core principles from the childcare register to really check that they're doing things as well as what would the legal requirement baseline be. So I think that for most providers who are thinking at that level, they've probably got most things in place already. So there wouldn't be a huge amount of change for them. It would just be the process of registration and some of those kind of internal checks that so that the people in charge and the staff involved would actually be really sure that they know and understand what that legal requirement now looks like. Most providers will have contracts with parents. They will probably have a registration form for the child. They will probably have a policy around admissions. They will have things like evacuation processes, and they will be following venue risk assessments and venue fire processes. But I think there's a big fear around the amount of paperwork that's involved. And in some cases, yes, it is a lot to start with. That's why we have the packs that we have for people to get to download or to utilize through our shop. But in reality, that's the stuff that they should already be doing. And it's not about childcare law. This is about employment law and about health and safety and all of that other stuff that most providers will have in place. So, to go back to your question about, is it a big step? Will everything change? For most cases, the answer is not really.
Okay.
Not really. But there's lots and lots of benefits to moving into that regulated space.
Okay. Got it. Understood. And thinking a little bit about the model, how does it work in terms of the way they work with the school? If I were to say, okay, I'm an activity provider, I've registered with Ofsted, I want to provide wraparound care. Do I invoice the school for my services? Do parents pay me? Is there a norm, or do different schools and activity providers do it differently?
Normally, the relationship, the contractual relationship, if you like, in any case, is between the activity provider and the parents, unless the school has commissioned a provider to come in and do, say, every Thursday they're coming in to do performing arts, for example, and a workshop. That would be a slightly different arrangement. But for most providers who are stepping into a regulated space where they're offering a much more regular offering to families that's available consistently before or after the school day, the contractual relationship tends to be between the provider and the parents. The schools that they're working with, that they're based on, will probably charge some kind of a rent for that space. And it's definitely important that providers put in place some kind of school service agreement, or as a minimum a rental agreement. But for most cases, it's between the agreement is between the provider and the parent.
Okay, fine. That's helpful. So then they will have to have something in place,
Mhm.
which they probably already do if they run these community classes. That makes sense. Cool. Rebekah, I feel like I've touched on pretty much everything I wanted to talk about, but I do want to give you the space to see if there's anything else you wanted to say, or tell our audience.
I think there's sort of nothing specific that I'd come with really. More interested to hear anybody who's listening's kind of reflection really about what is it that is preventing them from moving into the wraparound childcare market. What's their experience been? And one of the questions you asked me in the prep for this session was actually about what lessons we've learned, or I've learned in my journey. And for me, it's about the work that goes on behind the scenes. It's about the conversations that we have privately with all of our members, with people who are inquiring, who are asking a question. Our door and our email inbox is always open for people to ask a question, to say, I actually just don't understand, without fear of judgment. We
Hmm.
can't know everything. So if people have got questions about what the wraparound providers provision looks like, what the market looks like, how to get involved in anything, just ask a question. Those conversations that happen behind the scenes are the things that are the most powerful in what we do. And I just always want people to feel that they can ask for help before they get to crisis point, that they can ask for help without any fear of judgment, without feeling that they should know something,
Yeah.
because we can't know everything, and not even we know everything. But we learn from each other, and we truly want to have that open conversation, that transparent conversation, and to be able to provide as much support as we can for people who are doing brilliant jobs every day with families.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we definitely share that at Pebble, what we've been trying to do and sort of tell our our providers is that we want them to focus on what it is that they love doing and they're so good at doing and they're super passionate at doing. And all of the other stuff that is the headache of the admin, the headache of the paperwork, the headache of, they are not expected to be experts at that. And that there are resources and things that we can do as a software, you guys can do as an alliance and as a membership, as a members community to help with that. Because that in the end, the activity providers, that is what they're experts at, is actually like getting children the support, the care, the entertainment, whatever it is that they need. And in the end, that's why things like that are around, in order to help navigate them. So I think the work that you guys are doing are great, because it kind of helps them also be able to have the confidence, right, to run a business as well as also be looking after children, which is a full-time job, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
So thanks again for your time today with us. It was a pleasure talking to you. I know it's one of, I have a feeling this episode's going to be one of our most watched, because people have got so many questions around this. And yeah, thanks again for talking to us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.